Shocking. Rumors have it that the handsome leader of the Rao Group turned out to be a blind and leg-disabled man. Jianian, holding a red notebook in his hand, said. The next day, news of Mr. Rao's hidden marriage spread widely. Celebrities angry. Who stole our male god? Someone threw out a photo that appeared to be of Mrs. Rao's family. Hey. Nurse outfit, side face killing, black and straight, manga legs, innocent beauty. The famous lady scolded. Nothing but skin bags, hypocrisy, affectation. Jianian. Do you want to know more about vests? So, the innocent beauty instantly transformed into a big shot, and the famous ladies were horrified. Jianian. Sorry, I scared everyone present. In the upper-class society, appearance is also important. Jianian believes that although Mr. Rao is disabled, he excels in wealth and beauty, so he is crowned as a male god. Until one day, I saw the male god standing in a suit and leather shoes at a certain venue. Jianian said, wait a moment, aren't you blind with leg problems? Mr. Rao squinted his eyes as danger approached, who said I'm blind and have leg problems. Jianian. 2 months later, she was holding a pregnancy test report in her hand. Doctor. Congratulations, madam. You are pregnant with triplets. Pet, Shuangjia, 1v1 double boss. Keywords of the novel. Versatile young lady, beautiful and explosive without pop-ups, versatile young lady, beautiful and explosive. Download the complete set of TXT, and read the latest chapters of Versatile Young Lady, Beautiful and Explosive. Chapter 1. Obtaining certificates to become young madam. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Obtaining certificates to become young madam. Spring is bright and beautiful. Los Angeles. Located in front of a luxurious Chinese-style building halfway up the mountain. On both sides were servants dressed in black uniforms, led by a woman with hair tied in a bun, and a long red carpet lay on the ground. At this moment, a black sedan stopped in front of the gate, and the door opened. The man in a black suit got out of the car, walked around to the back seat, and respectfully opened the door. Madam Xiao, we have arrived at Jianian. In the back seat of the car, a white canvas shoe stepped out, with delicate white legs and a slender waist that didn't fit into the grip. Looking up, there was a delicate little girl's face. Her slender eyebrows, a pair of black eyes like a clear spring, and the sunlight casting on her face made her skin even whiter and redder. Her pink lips were slightly pouty, and her black hair was tied into balls. She was wearing a navy blue college-style dress, exuding a pure aura. Jianian had just gotten off the car and looked up at the building in front and the servant standing side by side. His hand hanging from his side quietly pinched a corner of his dress, and he closed his eyes. Uncle Qin, do I really want to live here? Upon hearing this, Qin Pei smiled kindly and said, Madam, you have already obtained the certificate from the young master. From now on, this will be your home. Jianian fell silent for a moment and said, Oh. The leading woman immediately welcomed her and said respectfully with a smile, Welcome madam, as she waved her big hand towards the servants. Welcome madam, the well-trained servants bowed 90 degrees. Jianian didn't know how to react, but fortunately, he bowed and said, You don't need to be so polite. Please give me more advice in the future. Servant. Qin Pei was taken aback and coughed lightly. Please applaud for Madam Xiao. Pop 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 pop. Applause. Qin Pei smiled and said, Madam, the old man has something else to ask me for. I won't be able to stay any longer, so I'll take my leave now. He then gave the woman a few more orders before leaving. Jianian stood there alone, feeling helpless. Madam, I am the old lady from Jianian, and everyone calls me Fansa. Fansa introduced herself with a friendly and respectful expression, and then raised her hand to make a gesture of invitation. Madam, please come in. Lu Jianian nodded and said, excuse me, Sister Fun. This is not troublesome at all, said Mrs. Fun, who was flattered and even waved her hand. Lu Jianian stepped out of her calves and followed Mrs. Fun into this Chinese-style garden. Behind her, a servant helped carry a suitcase. The combination of Chinese and Western styles, red makeup and green tiles, brilliant crystal walls, fountains and pools, and a winding corridor. This is the interior of the garden that Lu Jianian saw. I have to say, it's really exquisite and luxurious. I was taken all the way by Mrs. Fun to a bedroom in the west. Pushing open the door, looking out, there are classical and elegant carved walls, gilded decorations, oversized princess beds, lotus-pink bed curtains hanging on both sides, wind chimes hanging on the window frames, and fine plush carpet spread on the ground. The room is very large, giving people a bright and fresh girlish feeling. Madam, the room was specially improved by me. Do you think it's still satisfactory? Mrs. Fun said, feeling a bit lacking in confidence. After all, Madam, who had just entered, did not live in the master bedroom. Helplessly, this was ordered by the young master, and she had no choice but to comply. Lu Jianian smiled politely and said, very well, thank you, Sister Fun. Madam, as long as you're satisfied, saying, thank you or something has really ruined my life. It's almost noon. Please take a break. Lunch is ready, and I'll come and call you. After Mrs. Fun finished speaking, she immediately instructed the servant to help tidy up her luggage. The new book is difficult, I am looking for various forms of care. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Trembling hands excited. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Trembling hands excited. Lu Jianian saw the servant about to open her luggage, so she took a step forward and politely said, I'm used to organizing my luggage myself. You can go and help yourself. Madam, if you have any needs, please make sure to call us. Until Mrs. Fun and the maid left the room, Lu Jianian opened her luggage and took out a wooden box that had peeled off paint. Open the box and there is a jade pendant inside. Lu Jianian cherished and caressed the pendant. That is a type of koi fish with excellent jade texture, finely crafted, and the front half of the fish is carved to life. In fact, this pendant was supposed to be a combination of two, but she lost the other one. If it weren't for getting this pendant left by her mother from Qinglin, she wouldn't have easily agreed to marry into the Rao family. To the east of Shiyuan, inside the study. The man's slender eyelashes seemed to be able to catch the sunlight pouring in from outside the window. His light brown eyes, sharp lips pursed slightly, and he was wearing a light-colored silk dress. The softness of the texture alone could tell that it was a high-end design. His well-defined hand was placed on the armrest of the wheelchair, exuding a faint elegance, and his knee was being tapped with a percussion hammer. Time and time again. Okay, then you need to be careful not to walk around. As for the eye area, be sure not to be stimulated by strong light. After hearing the words of the family doctor, Rao Shurchen had no unnecessary expression on his face, and a faint voice sounded like a deep piano, After completing the examination, behind him, Assistant Su Chi raised his hand and respectfully escorted the doctor away. Mr. Rao, that driver committed suicide today and refused to point out the mastermind behind it. How could he have hit such a big road blindly? It was clearly intentional. Rao Shurchen's eyes were deep. How is the company? It's still calm and without any trace. Continue to observe. Rao Shurchen closed his eyes, and Senling's lips slowly poured out. It's a fox, and its tail will eventually come out. Yes. Boren Hospital. This is an internationally renowned and top-notch hospital. A black sedan stopped at the door. In the car, Qin Pei got off and held a purple sandalwood box in his hand, made of luxurious and expensive wooden materials. His nerves were tense, followed by rows of black suit bodyguards behind him. Indeed, the things inside the box are too important. That is related to the future development of the Rao family, and we must not take it lightly. Before the thing is handed over to the old man, he must ensure that it is intact and flawless. Otherwise, he will lose 10 dog lives and cannot afford it. In the VIP ward. A beam of sunlight fell in front of the hospital bed. An elderly person with graying hair and around 70 years old was wearing a hospital uniform, with his hands behind him, anxiously walking back and forth in the ward. The sound of steady footsteps coming from outside the ward door swept the old man's gaze, and he saw Qin Pei and his bodyguards appearing. His eyes lit up and he followed closely onto the rosewood box. "Master," Qin Pei walked into the ward and excitedly presented the box with both hands. "The things are inside." Upon hearing this, the old man trembled and reached out his hand to open the box. As the box was opened, the contents inside were finally exposed to the eye. The old man took out his things and his eyes turned red. "Red notebook, my grandson finally has a wife." "Yes, there are 2 red notebooks inside the box, and they are still hot." Qin Pei was moved to tears and said, "I can't help but cry. Young master, I have received the certificate." Roar, roar. Trembling hands and excited hearts, please click on bookmark to add to the bookshelf for easy reading. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Shooting a small core with Cupid's arrow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Shooting a small core with Cupid's arrow. The old man put the red notebook in the box like a treasure and said with satisfaction, "Now, I can be considered worthy of my dead son and daughter. Law. Our family finally has hope." Yes, for Rao Yanzhong, the most worrying thing in his old age was that his grandson, who was almost 28 years old, had not yet married. This made him anxious. Coincidentally, his body had an accident at this critical moment, which gave him an opportunity to threaten his grandson to obtain a certificate through his physical illness. "Master, the young master has obtained the certificate, and now you have a concern." Qin Pei's face showed a mother-like smile. "Anyway, he can be considered as watching the young master grow up." Rao Laozi smiled and nodded, "Yes, if we can have a great-grandson as we wish this year, it would be perfect. By the way, my grandson saw Jianian at the Civil Affairs Bureau today. Didn't he immediately fall in love? His little Jianian is good-looking and also kind and lovely. His grandson will definitely be tempted." Qin Pei's smile froze. Old man Rao sensed something was wrong and frowned. "What's wrong?" "Young master, he didn't show up," Qin Pei said with a mournful expression. Because of this, the photos on the documents were synthesized through technical means, which made him feel suffocated by Madame Xiao. "What?" Rao Laozi's voice was sharp, with a hint of disbelief. "He dared to stand up my little Nian-Nian's pigeon. I was so angry. How pitiful my little Nian was at that time, this bastard." The old man angrily picked up his phone, clicked on his contacts, found a certain number, and dialed it out. Shiyuan, study. In front of the huge desk, Rao Shichen's handsome face was reflected with a faint halo. Exquisite eyebrows and eyes slightly raised, narrow eyes falling on the document. At this moment, the phone placed on the side suddenly hummed, and his gaze swept over, causing his eyebrows to furrow slightly in an instant. So he raised his finger and rubbed his slightly swollen forehead before picking up his phone and lightly tapping the answer button. "Grandpa," he lifted his thin lips and shouted in a deep and pleasant voice, then moved his phone away from his ear. "Unfamilial descendants." A roar echoed through the phone, with a deafening sound that could penetrate a person's eardrums. Behind him, Su Qi silently dug out his ear. Rao Shichen pressed his phone back to his ear and said, "What's wrong, Grandpa? Are you okay to ask me what's wrong with you? Tell me, how many times have you been here since I was hospitalized?" "Once. Just once." "That's okay, but today you don't even plan to personally attend a major life event like obtaining a certificate. You're really losing face for me, Rao Yanzhong. How could I have a grandson like you? Ah bah. Rao Group glanced at the wheelchair under him and calmly replied, Grandpa taught me that it was my fault. I won't accept this kind of flattery. Well, Grandpa, you're handsome. Whatever you say is right. On the phone, there was a moment of silence. After a while, old man Rao's voice rang out again, but this time it wasn't as intense as before, and it seemed that his anger was slightly smoother. I could only hear the elderly person say on the phone, listen to me, little Jianian will start moving into the tin garden today. You must take out Cupid's arrow for me, shoot down my little Jianian's heart, and from now on, regardless of wealth or poverty, always love, respect, protect, and cherish her. Would you be willing to do so? In the ward, Qin Pei felt a sense of familiarity as he listened to this line. Rao Group pursed his thin lips and his light brown eyes flickered for a moment before saying, I am willing. Collect and add to the bookshelf on Look at Cupid's Arrow, How to Shoot Down Our Little Nian's Heart. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Zhen, Lu Jianian, Vase. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Zhen, Lu Jianian, Vase. The master bedroom on the west side. Lu Jianian was packing her luggage when suddenly she felt as if something had pricked her heart. Then, make her furrow her eyebrows. But soon, the tingling sensation disappeared, and the chest felt inexplicably stuffy. She is very certain that she has no heart disease. Is it because the air in the room is not circulating enough? So she stood up and walked to the window, opening it. As the window was opened, a large red flower blooming outside caught the eye. That is a garden full of flowers and plants, with rockeries and flowing water. Not far away, there is also a small pavilion with stone tables and chairs, which is very pleasing to the eye. At that moment, Lu Jianian had the idea of going out and breathing fresh air. On the other side, the study. Rao Group finished dealing with the old man, then put down his phone and raised his hand to pinch his forehead. After hesitating for a moment, Su Qi couldn't help but ask, Mr. Rao, don't you really need me to investigate that young lady? After all, isn't it strange that the young lady was able to win the favor of the old man during his hospitalization? No need. Rao Group voice was faint and without any waves. Have you forgotten how the old man once used his own strength to seize the position of the sovereign of the Rao family? Yes, when Rao Yenzhong was young, he was a ruthless character. As he grew older this year, he retired from behind the scenes to take care of himself. Su Qi understood instantly and said, I understand, Mr. Rao. Although the elderly are old, they are not confused. Since that young lady was able to gain the old man's special attention, there must be something extraordinary about her. Rao Group looked at the scenery outside the door with light brown eyes and said, Grandpa is getting old. Since he wants that woman to be his granddaughter, I will satisfy him. As the heir of the Rao family, one will eventually get married. In Rao Group's life, he never planned for the number one wife. In fact, he has no feelings for women. But he knows his identity clearly, and it is absolutely impossible for him not to get married. He has no intention of marriage. Since that's the case, what's the difference in marrying someone? Su Qi, what? So, is Mr. Rao planning to marry someone back and put them like a vase? I suddenly felt that the young lady was a bit pitiful. Hospitals. After Mr. Rao hung up the phone, he thought for a moment and sent a WeChat message to Mrs. Fun in Shiyuan on his phone. Mrs. Fun, who was directing the servants in the kitchen, received a WeChat message. Rao Yenzhong. Keep a close eye on Rao Group. If he dares to ignore my little recitation, report any situation to me immediately. Understood. Don't hide it. Superfierce.jpg. Upon seeing the WeChat message, Mrs. Fun immediately felt embarrassed. The old man over there asked her to report the military situation, but the young master here asked her to conceal the situation in Shiyuan. She always finds it difficult to tell the old man that as soon as the young lady moved into the Shiyuan, the young master arranged for her to stay in the master bedroom to the west. It was obvious that she didn't even want to see her once. Moreover, the young master had a car accident a while ago and was recovering from injuries to his eyes and legs, so she didn't go to the hospital to visit his old family. Hey! As the steward of Shiyuan, what should she do? After Mr. Rao finished sending WeChat, he instructed Qin Pei to bring the pre-prepared safe. He locked the outside of the rosewood box before putting it into the safe, followed by setting a password and fingerprint. Qin Pei, immediately deliver the safe to Jingtai Garden and put it in the second-to-last drawer of the third wardrobe in my second-floor room. I want that unfilial grandson to not get his marriage certificate and never get divorced. What's wrong? No feelings for women, no thoughts about marriage. Roar. Welcome to see how Mr. Rao slaps his face, the truth is about to come. Smiling, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. Rare encounter in 5,000 years. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Rare encounter in 5,000 years. Lu Jianian found herself lost. This vast tin garden is exquisitely laid out like a palace. She thought that if she left the bedroom and walked towards the back, it would be the small garden behind the window, but the fact proved that she was overthinking. At this moment, she had no idea where she was, only knowing that it was a small path paved with blue stones, with high red brick walls on both sides, and planted with willow trees. She stood in the middle of the path, with two intersections on the left and right, unsure where to go. After some thought, she was fortunate enough to close her eyes, spin them around, and then open them again. With guidance, she decided to walk to the right. A bright light cast behind her, casting her slender and delicate figure onto the slate road. She didn't know that the direction on the right was the eastern main area of Shiyuan. Study. Rao Shurchen closed the document, closed his eyes, raised his hand, and rubbed his forehead. He, who has always been indifferent and calm, inexplicably added a touch of impatience today, to the point where he couldn't even read a single word on the contents of the document. Upon seeing this, Su Chi suggested, "Mr. Rao, if your eyes are too tired, you might as well take a look at the scenery. The doctor has said that you can relax your eyes appropriately." Upon hearing this, Rao Shurchen opened his eyes and his light brown pupils were like glass beads. He glanced at the scenery outside the door and said faintly, "Then let's go out and disperse." "Okay, Mr. Rao." Su Chi stepped forward and respectfully picked up a pair of sunglasses, handing them to Rao Shurchen. Rao Shurchen's eyebrows furrowed slightly, his slender hand still lifted, took the sunglasses, and put them on. At this moment, Su Chi walked around behind him and pushed up the wheelchair. On the other side, when Lu Jianian walked along the path to the end, she realized that she had come to another world. This seems like a courtyard. Walking into the moonlit door, the dense bamboo trees are verdant and arranged side by side, with small flowing water and potted plants and trees. In addition to a pond of koi, there are also frosted glass lamp posts surrounding it, which is extremely poetic. If the lights come on at night, they will definitely be beautiful. Lu Jianian was instantly attracted, as if a root had taken root under her feet. She stood in front of the bamboo and watched the cute koi fish swimming around in the pond. She has an inexplicable love for koi. Suddenly, a koi fish did not follow the routine and suddenly leaped up, while at the same time, a splash of water was stirred up, as if it was about to splash her face. She suddenly stepped back and turned her head slightly. Such a large movement caused her hair clip to be thrown off, and her long hair tied into balls instantly loosened when Rao Shurchen was pushed out of the bedroom. A refreshing breeze blew in his face. He lifted his eyes slightly and saw the scene of a woman's dark long hair pouring down in an instant. The golden halo fell on the splashed blue silk at the end, and the woman wore a navy blue dress with a slender and graceful figure. At that moment, Rao Shurchen's eyelashes flickered slightly. "Who are you?" Su Qi let out a cold shout as he saw someone in the courtyard, not wearing a servant uniform. Upon hearing the sound, the woman turned around, her black eyes clear like spring water, with a hint of shock in the ripples. Her lips were red and her teeth white, as if walking out of a painting, breathtaking in beauty. Rao Shurchen's light brown eyes flashed with a stunning light. After living for a full 28 years, he saw for the first time such a beautiful painting that would be unforgettable to him for a lifetime. At this moment, something incredible seemed to have been injected into his chest. Su Qi was shocked. He has seen many beautiful women, but he has never seen someone like the girl in front of him. Beautiful, so beautiful. It's not an exaggeration to describe a beauty that is rare in 5,000 years. Welcome Mr. Rao to the truth scene. The plot will be even more exciting later on. Collecting and adding to the bookshelf is convenient for following up on articles. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Extraordinary Lu Jianian. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Extraordinary Lu Jianian. Being stared at like this, Lu Jianian's apricot eyes flickered slightly, feeling a bit at a loss for a moment. She whispered slowly, "Sorry, I'm lost. I don't know where this is." Lost. Rao Shurchen slowly kneaded his big palms and fingertips on the armrest of the wheelchair, his eyes hidden under the sunglasses deepening a bit. Ah. Su Qi reacted and seemed to understand something. Are you a new servant? It's not allowed here. The girl was born beautiful, and Su Qi's voice unconsciously softened a bit. Upon hearing the word servant, Lu Jianian didn't know how to respond. She's not a servant. At present, her sparkling apricot eyes were no longer as startled as before, only clear and moist. Her eyelashes flickered, and she followed her gaze over Su Qi, landing on the man in the wheelchair. The man has black hair like ink, sits upright, and is dressed in an unparalleled style. His sunglasses cover his eyes, revealing his thin lips with sharp edges and a firm jaw. The halo fell in front of the wheelchair and onto the man's slender and jade-like hand, with distinct joints and very beautiful features. Lu Jianian only glanced at her and quickly closed her eyes. Sorry, I didn't know this place was prohibited from entering, sorry to bother you. After speaking, she turned around and was about to leave. Behind him, Su Qi felt anxious as he saw the girl about to leave. At this moment, someone happened to step into the moonlit door and almost collided with Lu Jianian. The person is holding a tray in their hand, with a teacup still on it. Lu Jianian saw that she was about to bump into someone, so she immediately took a step back. Rao Shurchen's gaze kept falling on Lu Jianian, his eyebrows slightly raised. Oh. The person who came in was Sister Fun. She awkwardly straightened the tray before spilling the tea. Then she looked up at the person in front of her and was surprised, young lady. Su Qi widened his eyes and said, What? Did he hear you wrong, Madam Xiao? Rao Shurchen's gaze had been fixed on Lu Jianian, except for the deep meaning in his eyes, his appearance was surprisingly flawless. Actually, when he heard the girl say he was lost, he immediately understood her identity in his heart. The reason is that his courtyard never allows servants to enter, except for Sister Fun. Moreover, the servants who have just entered the Tin Garden do not have the courage to wander around and get lost. The girl in front of me is very extraordinary. Lu Jianian felt inexplicably relieved when she saw Mrs. Fun appear. Madam, why are you here? Mrs. Fun noticed something in her eyes as she spoke. She turned her head and said, Ah. Young master, so you're here. Young master. Lu Jianian's eyes lit up with surprise, and she clenched the corner of her clothes with her small hand. She looked up again and her gaze fell on the man. In fact, from the extraordinary demeanor and clothing of the man just now, it can be seen that his identity is extraordinary. He should be someone here. However, she never imagined that he would be the mysterious CEO of Rao Group, who was rumored to be handsome and incomparable, indifferent and ruthless. Rao Shurchen. What surprised her even more was his eyes and his legs. Jianian's watery eyes swept over the man's sunglasses and wheelchair, and then she closed her eyes, not knowing what she was thinking. She stood in the light, graceful, quiet and picturesque. Rao Group raised his eyebrows slightly and pursed his thin lips lightly. At this moment, Mrs. Fan felt the atmosphere was a bit stiff. Why doesn't the young master speak? Is it because the young lady came here? Yes. The young master specifically asked the young lady to stay in the master bedroom on the west side. Isn't it because he doesn't want to be with the young lady? You must be angry when you see Madame Xiao. What exactly is Jianian, the innocent beauty, thinking about? Please take care of yourself and add it to your bookshelf. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Gently soothes his restless heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Gently soothes his restless heart. Mrs. Fan thought to herself how to help Madame Xiao out of the siege. Unexpectedly, a soft voice suddenly sounded, Sister Fan, I'm lost. Could you please take me away later? I'll go outside and wait for you first. Jianian was well aware that it was not allowed to enter here and wisely suggested leaving. She folded her hands in front, with a straight back, and lifted her steps, walking elegantly out of the moonlight door. At a distance, Rao Group's phoenix eyes watched as the gentle figure disappeared from sight. His large palm, resting on the armrest of the wheelchair, slowly closed, as if trying to grab something. Young master, I've brewed a cup of ginseng tea for you. Fan Saw walked up cautiously. Rao Group responded lightly. Fan Saw. Is the young master not angry? Surprisingly, there was no intention of blaming her. This little episode is considered past. Twilight meets all four. The huge tin garden lights lit up, beautiful like a palace. The antique layout features an expensive wooden sofa, a rotating glass lamp on top, and glass walls surrounding it, providing a panoramic view of the outside. The splendid decoration of crystal walls, finely crafted stone pillars, and various valuable antiques not only exude luxury but also maintain taste. There is a black piano in the corner. In front of the piano, the girl's ink hair was draped over her back, and she was wearing a white double-breasted dress. The small bow at the waist highlighted her A4 waist, with a sleek curve that shone brilliantly under the light. Her fair fingers landed on the piano keyboard, her slender eyelashes drooping slightly, and the beautiful piano notes slowly flowed out, creating a beautiful melody. That's a song she really likes. Sky City. This is the lobby. After dinner, Jianian learned about the general layout of Shiyuan through the map provided by Sister Fan. In fact, Shiyuan covers an area of nearly half a mountain, and it is not enough time in a day to introduce every place. Fan's sister-in-law came up with this plan to prevent Jianian from getting lost again. The entire tin garden is cleverly planned in every area, with shortcut paths between each area. Jianian only found out after reading the map that the courtyard to the east was Rao Group's main residential area and also a prohibited area for the entire Shiyuan. At this moment, Jianian, immersed in the sound of the piano, did not notice any scorching sight not far away. At the entrance of the hall, the man in the wheelchair was wearing a light gray shirt, with deep phoenix eyes, staring at the straight figure in front of the piano. After a day, his heart was restless, and his mind would inexplicably flash with that beautiful face. After dinner, he pushed his wheelchair out of the courtyard and went to the garden in front to take a casual look. When he saw a figure in the hall from a distance through the glass, he unknowingly arrived at the entrance of the hall. In front of the piano, with long, ink-like hair and a soft figure, the girl is right there at this moment. Perhaps it was the soft and melodious sound of the chime, like a soft hand gently soothing his restless heart. The song ends. Jianian took a light breath, withdrew her hands, and noticed something unusual at the same time. At the next moment, her gaze swept towards the direction of the entrance. When the girl's gaze turned towards him, Rao Group first lowered his gaze, his face calm, and a faint tone said, "You're playing well." At this moment, Jianian was surprised in her heart. The man in the wheelchair did not wear sunglasses, and his handsome and delicate facial features were clearly visible, as if perfectly crafted by God. She stood up from the chair, crossed her hands in front, unsure of what to say, and could only say, "Thank you." The plot behind is very exciting. Ang Chongwen is neither cruel nor cruel. Click to join the bookshelf for easy article tracking, and remember to check in. Let's see how Mr. Rao really smells. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Will never be the same again. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 will never be the same again. Next, no one spoke again. The quiet space creates an awkward atmosphere. Jianian raised her shingmo slightly, her gaze fixed on the man. From this perspective, one can see his slender black eyelashes covering his eyelids. Due to the man's slightly drooping gaze, she could never see those eyes clearly. Rao Group played with a string of Buddhist beads with his big palm, his gaze slightly drooping, and he could feel the girl's gaze secretly scrutinizing him. At this moment, his face was indifferent, his palm accidentally loosened, and a Buddha bead fell to the ground with a snap. Jia was taken aback for a moment, and her apricot eyes fell on the string of Buddhist beads on the ground. That is a bead made of southern glazed beads, which are priceless in the market. Beads should be expensive. At this moment, the Buddha pearl fell in front of the man's wheelchair. Jianian hesitated, unsure whether to step forward and help pick it up. What other rules do men have? For example, cleanliness fetish or... It's like she accidentally entered a forbidden area in the morning, breaking his rules. Just as she hesitated, the man's crisp voice rang out with a hint of freshness, "Can you help me pick it up?" Upon hearing this, Jianian bit her lip and said, After finishing speaking, she stepped up to the wheelchair and bent down. Her fair little hand reached out and picked up the string of Buddhist beads from the ground, gently wiping away the invisible dust. In fact, there are servants cleaning the tin garden every day, and the floor is so clean that not a single strand of hair can be seen. Jianian finished wiping and handed the Buddha beads to the man. Probably to confirm something, she held the Buddha pearl and handed it over without speaking. At this moment, the man remained indifferent. At this moment, Jianian frowned slightly and her almond eyes flickered, "Your Buddha pearl." As she finished speaking, the man's slender and beautiful hand lifted and remained in mid-air, a little distance away from the Buddha pearl in her hand. It was clear that as long as he stretched forward, he could retrieve the Buddha beads, but the man stopped moving. As the man reached out his hand, his beautiful phoenix eyes also lifted slightly, with no focus in their eyes. Jianian secretly took a deep breath. Turns out, his eyes really can't see. She guessed when she saw him wearing sunglasses in the morning, but still held a skeptical attitude until now when she saw it with her own eyes. Jianian whispered, "I'm sorry." She placed the Buddha pearl in the man's palm. At this moment, the man grabbed the Buddha pearl with his big palm and lightly touched her soft fingertips with his fingertips, gently crossing her fingertips. A slight cool touch. Jianian's body paused and saw that he had already caught the Buddha pearl. He immediately withdrew his hand and stood up, with the back of his hand behind him. "Thank you," Rao Group said in a faint tone. Trembling's thin lips curved slightly, and he played with the Buddha beads in his palm. "You're welcome." Jianian felt a little guilty about his probing behavior when he handed him the Buddha pearl just now. "You play the piano very well, can you play it again? Do you want to hear it?" So, Jianian agreed. She sat in front of the piano again, lifting and landing her fingers on the black and white keys. With her movements, a piano piece slowly played throughout the entire hall. The song is called "Street Where the Wind Resides." At this moment, the man's wheelchair had already been pushed forward with her help and stopped behind her. Unlike his previous gaze, his eyes were now burning with a scorching light, and his gaze fell on the slender and perfect back of the girl. He had a pulsating sound in his chest, his blood seemed to be flowing backwards, and all he saw was the figure of a girl. Outside the glass wall, the moonlight is bright, the breeze blows, and the tree shadows sway. The sound of the cheen is beautiful, and this night may seem calm, but it is destined to be something different in the dark. What's different? Quickly collect and add to the bookshelf, let me tell an I Meng. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Holding Her Hand. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Holding her hand the next day. Sunshine shines brightly. Mrs. Fan carried a tray and walked into the eastern courtyard. According to the usual habits of the young master, she respectfully placed the breakfast on the tray on the small dining table. Breakfast is set according to standard nutrition, such as a cup of milk, a bowl of wheat congee, sandwiches, and some fruit. At this moment, Rao Group pushed the wheelchair and came out of the master bedroom. Today he was wearing a white shirt, with the top button at the collar unbuttoned, revealing a small piece of jade skin. The navy blue buttons shone brilliantly, revealing a customized design. Upon seeing the visitor, Mrs. Fan immediately respectfully smiled and said, "Young master, breakfast is ready." Upon hearing this, Rao Group twisted the buttons on his sleeves with a slender and beautiful hand, and his phoenix eyes lightly glanced at the breakfast on the dining table. "Let's remove them all," he said. Mrs. Fan was surprised and quickly realized, "Young master, is breakfast not to her taste?" At this moment, Rao Group raised his gaze slightly, glanced at the sunlight outside the door, and raised his eyebrows slightly. "The weather is nice," he said. Mrs. Fan. "What?" Rao Group frowned and said, "Push me to the restaurant." Mrs. Fan. Restaurant, exquisite and atmospheric round wooden dining table, a dazzling array of Chinese and Western breakfast. After a night's sleep, Jianian's skin was rosy and fair, full of vitality, and very radiant. At this moment, she sat at the dining table, elegantly enjoying breakfast. When Rao Group first entered the restaurant, he saw the serene and elegant appearance of the girl at the dining table with her eyes slightly drooping. Today, she curled up her long hair, and the bangs on her forehead outlined her palm-sized face, slightly pink. She was wearing a black polka-dot chiffon dress with a slightly lower neckline, revealing her fair collarbone. Rao Group's eyes, hidden under his sunglasses, flickered with a flicker of light as his big fingers, resting on the armrest of the wheelchair, slowly kneaded something. At this moment, Jianian noticed something unusual at the entrance and lifted her gaze. When she saw someone coming, she immediately stood up from her chair. Fan pushed Rao Group to the main table and respectfully said, "Young master and young lady, please take your time to eat." After saying this, she nodded politely and walked away. As the steward of Shiyuan, Sister Fan is very knowledgeable. Although she couldn't figure out why the young master suddenly came to the restaurant for dinner, she knew it was a rare opportunity for the young master and the young lady to get along alone, so she shouldn't have stayed. As Mrs. Fan left, the atmosphere of the restaurant suddenly became inexplicable. Jianian stood in his original position, unsure if he should sit down and continue eating. She held her hands in front of her, feeling a bit awkward for a moment. In fact, she didn't know what she was embarrassed about, probably because the man in front of her was her nominal husband. However, after a brief encounter last night, she realized that men are actually very approachable. At the main table, Rao Group's phoenix eyes scanned the girl standing beside her through sunglasses, followed by her slender hand and slowly lifted it, reaching towards the table. There was a glass of milk in front of him, and he fumbled to get it. His fingertips touched the rim of the glass, and if he pushed forward, the glass would knock over. Jianian saw that his big palm was about to touch the milk cup, and his eyes lit up. He quickly reached out his small hand to grab the cup and quietly moved it towards him. Unexpectedly, she had intended for the man to get the milk glass, but the man's big palm touched the glass and forcefully pressed down on her hand. The warm palm wrapped around the back of her hand, and even her fingertips couldn't avoid it. The touch hit her heart through her fingertips. 10 fingers connected to the heart. Lu Jianian's entire spine stiffened. She dared not move, but at the same time saw the man's eyebrows furrow, as if unsure of what she had caught. Black belly, Rao Zone, poor little Nian Nian on. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Awkwardness and Ambiguity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Awkwardness and Ambiguity. Lu Jia hesitated on her lips and reminded, "You grabbed my hand. Is that right?" Rao Shichen seemed to need his palm to confirm something. Lu Jianian's face lit up and she said, "Can you loosen it a bit?" Rao Shichen's tone was light, and he let go of his palm. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," Lu Jianian put her hand behind her. I don't know why, but she felt as if her pinched palms were scorching hot. Rao Shichen placed his big palm on the dining table, without further exploration, but his eyebrows furrowed tightly. At this moment, Lu Jianian felt that the man seemed to have encountered some difficulties, so her almond eyes drooped slightly. She couldn't help but ask softly, "What do you want to eat?" "I can help you." Of course, she felt embarrassed to say the last sentence. Upon hearing this, Rao Shichen's phoenix eyes, hidden behind his sunglasses, flickered slightly. For a moment, he said, "It's all fine. Is milk okay?" Lu Jianian picked up the milk at the dining table, hesitated for a moment, and finally handed it to the man's palm. "The milk you wanted," she said, "thank you." Rao Shichen's clear and smooth voice rang out, while his slender hand took the milk and his fingertips inevitably slid over her fingertips. At this moment, Lu Jianian saw him catch the milk, so she quickly withdrew her hand and sat down on the dining chair, silently eating breakfast in front of her, but her eyes couldn't help but look at the other person. Rao Shichen held the milk and sipped it slowly. His sharp and thin lips opened and closed, and his sexy Adam's apple slid up and down. Looking down, he wore an extremely white shirt on him, inexplicably exuding a sense of abstinence. The collar was slightly lower, and his skin was as smooth and beautiful as sheep-fat jade. His temperament was like a fairy, and he was extremely charming. "Do you have congee?" "Ah." Lu Jianian was a bit distracted, until a pleasant magnetic voice suddenly sounded. She then responded, glancing at the table, "Is congee and wheat congee okay?" Rao Shichen responded lightly, with a faint gleam in his phoenix eyes. Lu Jianian put down the spoon in his hand, pushed the turntable over, took the wheat congee in front of him with both hands, and handed it to the man. "The wheat congee you want." Rao Shichen said as he lifted both hands and directly pressed down on the girl's soft and delicate hands, taking the bowl over. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Lu Jianian said, her whole face turning red. Both little hands were lightly caressed by the man's big palm, feeling very hot. She couldn't look directly at her hands, but she knew that men were not intentional. After all, men have inconveniences. A breakfast ended in such an awkward and ambiguous atmosphere. Hospitals. Lu Jianian rolled up her long hair. White skin, red lips and white teeth, changing into a nurse's uniform, a pair of straight legs comparable to comics, slender and tender white. She changed her uniform before leaving the dressing room, and then pushed a medical cart to the VIP ward, ready to deliver medicine to the patient. The wards in this area are almost all elderly grandparents, and she is mostly responsible for them. Perhaps she is good-looking, speaks softly and patiently, and the elderly all like her, even vying for her to become their granddaughter-in-law. Unfortunately, no matter how fierce the competition was, everyone ultimately lost to Rao Yenzhong from VIP Ward 8. Ward 8. On the hospital bed, Rao Yenzhong was holding his phone and sending WeChat to his so-called unfilial grandson. Voice. "Did you secretly neglect my little memory on our wedding night last night?" If you dare to ignore her, I will break your leg. Shiyuan. A huge study. Rao Shuchen's phoenix eyes were deep in understanding, and the two big palms placed on the table gently rubbed their fingertips. The smooth texture, as well as the softness, seems to still retain the fragrance of a girl's palm. I have caught the little hand, but Rao feels like it's not enough. How will I activate the belly black mode next? Hurry up and add it to the bookshelf. Also, if you think it looks good, please give it 5 stars, Momoda. End of this chapter.